It's a great pleasure for me to be here with you and to get opportunity to introduce you one of the positive examples of the world. How can a small language be revitalized, even though there was a time when it was self-evident that this language will die. We are talking about Inari-Sami language. It's one of the northernmost languages of this conference, I think, together with Greenlandic. So I'm going to introduce you some basic development about endangerment and, on the other hand, revitalization of Inari-Sami language. I'm going to discuss the problem of the lost generation, and I'm going to introduce you basic elements of, or basic factors of revitalization of Inari-Sami language, which are language nest, intensive language education for adult people, and so-called master apprentice program, which means taking elder speakers to this work. And I'm also going to introduce some problems that language community is still facing. And I'm going to try to give some kind of answer to a question which I hear very often. The question, how was this all possible? Because we are talking about a language which has 350 speakers. Well, I am not a Sami, I'm a Finnish who just happened to learn Inari-Sami language. I was born in central Finland and I moved to Inari to study Northern Sami and after that also Inari-Sami. I am related to Inari-Sami language in quite many roles. I'm a kind of language activist in that community. I work in many projects related not only to Inari-Sami language but also to other Finno-Ugric languages. For instance, right now I'm working in a project called Finno-Ugrian Language Nest Project, and we are trying to promote language nest activities in Russian Federation. I am a PhD student at Helsinki University, and the issue of my dissertation is just the same as my issue today, revitalization of Inari-Sami language. And I'm also a mother of 2 children who are bilingual in Finnish and Inari-Sami. Even though they are just as Finnish as me, their father is also totally Finnish, but my kids have been learning Inari-Sami language since their early childhood in Language Nest. Very often people think that there is some kind of one Sami language in the world, but they are altogether 9 living Sami languages. The smallest one, Ter-Sami, spoken in Russian Federation, has approximately 5 speakers, and the biggest one, Northern Sami, has something like 20 or 30,000 speakers. Inari-Sami is something between, because as I already said, nowadays it has approximately 350 speakers. There are 3 Sami languages spoken in Finland: North Sami, Inari-Sami and Skolt-Sami. And Inari-Sami is spoken only in Finland and only in the municipality of Inari. And this makes Inari officially 4-lingual municipality. Here you can see where we are located. And here you can see this phenomenon of 4 official languages in practice. This is School of Inari Village, and the name of the school is written in all the 4 languages. And all these 4 languages are also used as medium of education. So there is actually instruction in all these 4 languages in this school. How did anaraskiela, Inari-Sami language, became endangered? It has always been a small language. It has been estimated that the amount of speakers has never been more than 1,000. And nowadays it is a little bit smaller. Inari-Sami is a kind of double minority language because, as I mentioned, most people really think that there is only one Sami language in the world, and it usually means the North Sami, which is the main Sami language, which has many dozens of thousands of speakers. So, for instance, in Finland almost nobody knows anything about Inari-Sami people and Inari-Sami language, and it's quite a surprise for them to hear that there exists such a group in the country. Inari-Sami people have been described very tolerant and flexible and humble people. And I think, and Inari-Sami people themselves also think, that it's one main reason for this development of endangerment. They have been too humble. They haven't been fighting for their rights. But the main reason for endangerment of Inari-Sami language is Finnish education policy, which concretely means boarding schools. Inari-Sami children, like other Sami children as well, and like children of many other minorities and indigenous groups around the world, were sent to boarding schools at the age of 7 years. And in these schools, all the instruction was given in Finnish. Inari-Sami had no position in education process, and it was prohibited to speak Inari-Sami. And as you all understand, this kind of policy leads to a rapid endangerment of a language. There were other reasons, of course, as well. The whole Second World War and its consequences. For instance, Inari-Sami people were evacuated to Finnish-speaking areas in central Finland for two years and so on. Since 1940s, diminishing use as a home language, Inari-Sami people born in 1950s still knew the language, but well, let's say half of the Inari-Sami people born in 1950s may have learned the language at home, but almost nobody born in 1960s has learned the language at home. Like Tuve Skutnapkangas and Ole Henrik Magga have put it, even if schools alone cannot save languages, schools can kill them more or less on their own. And this is really what happened among Inari-Sami people. First steps in revitalization of the language. There were some developments already in 1960s and 70s, but the first actual act toward revitalization was a foundation of Anaraskiela Servi, which means Inari-Sami Language Association. It was founded in 1986, and there were two activists called Matti Morottaja and Ilmari Mattus who founded this association, and they started the revitalization of Inari-Sami language. You may well say so. And what was really important in this language association was the decision to use only Inarisaami language in all the activities of this organization. So all they wrote was in Inarisaami language, and only speakers of Inarisaami languages could become members of this organization. And I think it's really a key of revitalization of this language. They decided to speak the language. They decided to use the language, even if majority of the people didn't know the language, because it had become so endangered. The most important year of revitalization was 1997. By that time, there were only 4 speakers under the age of 30, so almost no children or no young people speaking the language. And actually there were very little active speakers under the age of 50. But in 1997 there were 2 language nests founded, one in the village of Inari and another in Ivalo. Language nest is a kind of early total immersion in a local language. It's a kindergarten group in which the staff uses only the minority language from the first day, even if children don't understand the language. So the children will learn the language very fast. They become bilinguals, and the aim of these activities is not only bilingualism of children, but also restarting the intergenerational language transmission. So the aim is to activate parents that they will study the language as well and start using it at home. Here you can see children of Inarisaami language nests. The most important impacts and influences of language nest activities have been, there are 3 main impacts. The first one is that since the year 2000, Inarisaami language has been a medium of instruction in primary school of Inari village. The second one is that many parents have started to study the language. And the third main impact is that there actually has been going on a very significant reversal language shift in all the community. So people who used to be passive speakers of the language have started to speak the language. Many parents have started to use the language at home, and so on. What kind of challenges does the language community have nowadays? Still 5 years ago, there was this huge problem called problem of the lost generation, which means that there are elder people knowing the language and there are children knowing the language, but between these age groups there are far too little speakers who could work as teachers, who could work in language nests, who could make school books and so on. And how was this problem of lost generation solved? 2 years ago, we organized an intensive language course for adult people of the community. This education lasted 1 whole academic year. It was organized by Oulu University together with Inarisaami Language Association and Sami Education Center. Target group were adult members of the community. Especially we were trying to look for teachers and other people working in professions critical for language transmission. And the goal of this education was to teach the language to adult people so well that after this education they could actually be working in Inari-Sami language. One of the most important methods we were using was called kielamiester harjuttallam in Inari-Sami language. This is a kind of variant of master apprentice program which has been used in revitalization of many native languages of California, USA. This means that our students spent many days with elder speakers of Inari-Sami language. Sometimes they were only chatting, sometimes they went fishing or feeding reindeers or shopping or anything. But they had to spend all the day together and speak only Inari-Sami language. It was a very strict principle of these activities. They had to speak only Inari-Sami language. And this method seemed to be a kind of success. Our students just loved it because it didn't only give them better skills of Inari-Sami language, but it also gave them opportunity to get to know the language community, to get to know this traditional culture of Inari-Sami people, and which was also important, it gave opportunity to these elder people to take part in this revitalization process. Many of them are living somewhere, not in the village, but for instance 50 kilometers from Inari village. Many of them are not able to read or write in their own language because they were children of boarding schools. And many of them haven't been speaking Inari-Sami to their own children because they were the children of boarding schools. But they got opportunity to transmit their knowledge and language skills to our students, and it was very important to them as well. Here you can see some students and teachers and language masters of our adult education. Well, we got 17 new speakers. This is not a very big number, but in a small community of 350 speakers, it's a huge step forward. And out of these 17 students, 8 immediately got new Inari-Sami speaking job. And after this education, it became possible to teach some subjects also not only in primary school, but also in secondary school. 2 new language nest groups were founded, and much more teaching materials have been developed after this education, and so on. This has been a very important step in our community. Inari-Sami as a success story in the context of global revitalization movement. Why and how? How was this possible? I think one of the main factors of this success is tolerance. So about the same factor that made Inari-Sami so vulnerable 100 years ago or 50 years ago. Inari-Sami people were too tolerant 100 years ago. They couldn't fight for their rights. But nowadays the tolerance is a positive factor because it makes revitalization possible. It's tolerance toward change of livelihoods, culture, the language, speakers, and all the speech community. For instance, outsiders like myself have been wished welcome in the community. Actually, this language education I was talking about, half of the students were Finns. And actually, for instance, one of the teachers teaching in Inari-Sami language in Inari-Sami class is from Hungary. So this is not possible in all the communities. And I think that without this kind of tolerance, revitalization of such a small language couldn't been possible. Another very important factor is that Inarisaami community has been concentrating on the most important areas. Language transmission. So the main factors have been language nest, bilingual school instruction, and intensive language education for adults. Because as you all understand, if the community hasn't got children knowing the language, no other projects, no other factors of revitalization won't save the language. And I'm not saying that Language Nest could do it alone, but Language Nests can do it together with school instruction and language education for adults. Inarisaami people have for decades been consciously creating domains for language use. Domains that didn't exist, they had to be done. And Inarisaami people decided to speak the language, not only about the language, which unfortunately is the situation in many endangered communities nowadays. For instance, if we take a look at Karelian Republic in Russian Federation, the language activists in Karelia don't speak the language with each other and with their children. But in Inarisaami community, it is already a norm to speak the language to anybody who knows it a little bit. And of course, the main reason for this success are individuals, brave and innovative and enthusiastic activists of Anarkiela Servi. Here you can see two of them, Utspärnävuoli Ilmari Mattus, and Kuopcha-Saamal Matti Morottaja, who founded this language organization in 86. These are, I wanted to write these Sami names because they have their own system of naming people. And here we can see also an important individual of Inarisaami community. This is rap artist called Amok, Mikkal Antti Morottaja. He actually is son of Matti Morottaja, the previous gentleman here. And Amok has been performing rap music in Inarisaami language, and he has been one of the few role models for Inarisaami youngsters. And he has been very important for the community, for instance, because it's totally unexpectable and totally radical to do something like this in Inarisaami language, which was considered to be a dying language. Thank you. Kiitos.